Ahora, ¿escuchan ahora?
Ahora sí.
Perfecto. Muchas gracias, diputada Campagnoli.
Gracias, diputada. Qué bueno. Siempre nos
Qué bueno,
ayuda
Brian,
mucho.
verte.
Well, I will start again. That's okay. I want to now. Should I unmute or?
No, you don't need. It's just in
Yeah,
here.
right, that's what I thought. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfecto, diputada. Gracias. I want to say that, first of all, it occurred to me on the way into class today that when we started 4 months ago, it was dark outside. It was still winter. And now we're in late spring with summer coming and we're all in shorter sleeve shirts and it's hot outside and it's light. And maybe there's a metaphor for that we have light now. And I want to also express my respect and admiration for the country, the nation, and the government of Argentina, and the people, most importantly, the people. Because when I first arrived here, I had some appreciation that it was the 200th anniversary of the diplomatic relations and the 40th anniversary, and some sense that of the importance of the election. But I must say, what a tremendous privilege it has been to be here from the PASO election, then the general election, and now the final election and the swearing in and the inauguration yesterday. And what's amazing and touches my heart wherever it happens is that however one feels about the outcome, whether you supported one candidate or another, or maybe disagree with one policy or another, and that's important. What matters so profoundly and what we saw yesterday was the peaceful transition of the authority of the presidency and of a new Congress, some new Senate members across the nation, new gubernatorial, new governors, and that is amazing. And especially in the contrast to the violence and the upheaval that was so shocking in my own country, to see the transition here was remarkable. And to listen to be privileged to listen to the speeches and watch the whole process was really remarkable. So my congratulations and gratitude and respect to the people of Argentina and my personal best wishes for success. However one feels about who wins an election, you have to hope that there will be a successful benefit to the country. That's true of all of our elections. And so lots of work to be done for sure here. And yet people seem willing to come together and try to make that happen. So I really respect that immensely. I also want to start by thanking Juan de Dios for his leadership, his initiative, his wisdom and insights in putting this class together. And we're going to have a whole discussion in a moment, but I want to start with the gratitude and Sol Ibarra for her remarkable translation over the course of this year. And also for all the technical crew that has been Pilar and others who behind the scenes make the Zooms work, etc. And then I think most importantly of all, my gratitude to each of you who has attended this class, who have participated, have added your thoughts, offered interesting perspectives and questions. What a privilege for me personally to hear from so many distinguished leaders in government, in the diplomatic corps, in the scholarly world, and of course the students and their valuable insights and knowledge and questions. So what a great course we've had. Juan, did you want to start with that image now, or shall we begin with the discussion?
Yes, I would like to start. Let me see if you, yeah, it's there. And I just want to tell you, Brian, thank you very much. Of course, in behalf of the Austral University and myself. It's incredible that such an important person like you come to Argentina to live and to teach about the American Studies program. And I am sure that we understood better the government and politics in the United States. Thanks to you, I think you are doing a great job, a great service for your country, and of course for Argentina and the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. It's really, truly an honor and a real privilege to learn from so many people. Juan took the effort, and I think it's remarkable, to put together this montage of faces. And as I look at these people, we know who they are. And they are really the top level.
Yes.
The top level of scholars, authors, leaders in their field, and their generosity. You think of how many hours these people dedicated to us. And I want to share with you something. In every single case, every one of them afterwards said how much they enjoyed it, how much it helped them spend time thinking about Argentina, how much they appreciated the thoughtful questions. And I could tell that they, you know, when someone's asked to do a presentation, maybe you say, yeah, I can do that. But every one of them felt closer to Argentina, closer to all of you, excited and inspired by the interchange, every single one. And it was very gratifying to me. That was the purpose ultimately of the course. How can we improve understanding and mutual relationships? And in those cases, these relationships and understanding will continue for years and years to come. And Juan and I are committed to making that happen as well. Also, I want to, before we go any further, also thank all of you for your hospitality. We came down here not just to zoom in from the States, but to live here, to be part of the culture. And we're going to stay here, we being my wife, my two 18-year-old boys, and I, and we'll be here through March, actually, with a nice vacation in Patagonia starting next week. But we have loved the experience of living here. So with that, what Juan and I thought we would do is spend a little bit of time. Hola, Nestor. We thought we would spend some time really with open discussion. And it's not a bad idea to leave the images up here. Do you think, Juan, to remind people maybe there are topics we didn't cover or we want to get into? But we thought we would leave this as, shall we do the books at the end or shall we do them now? What do you think?
You can explain why the books are here.
Yes. I'm going to see if I can change the books. Trying to adjust the screen. There's
If I'm not wrong, for example, there is a book about the presidential debate in the United States.
there sure is.
Yeah, so all of those books are related to the classes, exactly.
I'm trying to zoom a screen on my screen in so you can see, but it's not. Oh, I know why it's sideways. How ridiculous! I'm going the wrong way. Yikes! What happened? I just lost my image. Oh, I know what happened. Sorry. There, now I finally got it right. There.
Yes, perfect.
Now I can zoom in. Ding.
Yes.
So sorry for the, if you could see one of the screens on has a number of books. How many did we count? Well, I think it's well over 40 books of all the topics we discussed. Many books by authors who spoke to us. Peter Irons of the History of the Supreme Court, Norm Ornstein and his writings about Congress, Matt McWilliams on fascism, and many others are here. And those, I'm going to leave all of those behind. Some are my own personal collection that I thought you might not have access to them here, so I brought them down. Some, the Fulbright Foundation gave me a small subsidy.
So perhaps you can provide us the list?
Yes.
Yes, we will provide you the list. The other thing is that I want to share is Juan is going to make available the access to all of the videos. So if you want to use them to review them, to learn from them, and we can, if anybody's interested in following up with a particular presenter, I'm happy to try to make those connections as well. And so with that, let's just open things up. I want to also make a special thanks. I see Dario Polsky here. I think, Dario, you win the prize for the most distance traveled and the most hours of time difference to join us. And I admire it greatly. But also I see all faces from members of Congress from other countries, diplomats, etc. And each one of you has brought so many skills to this. So with that, let's just open things up for discussion. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm happy to share any insights I have, but I want to hear your insights about any topics we've covered or haven't covered. So we're just going to open it up. Juan will help me call on people. Oh, that's a nice view of the books. That whoever did that in the tech staff, thank you so much for showing that. Bienvenidas. Okay, so let's open it. Once we have some people here in the classroom here. But let's start with folks online. Any person at all who wants to offer a comment, question, suggestion, just raise your hand. We'll watch for it on our Zoom view. Let's see hands up. Juan?
En primer lugar, Moisés Benamor, que es una persona que hace más de 20 años que vive en los Estados Unidos.
Ah, sí.
Porque es el responsable de parlamentos, se llama entidades legislativas de la Organización de Estados Americanos.
Ah, wonderful.
Vive en Washington, D.C. y él me dijo que en 5 minutos quiere ingresar y quiere hacer un comentario, su opinión, siendo americano ya, ¿no?
Sí,
siendo estadounidense, con respecto al curso y a los panelistas.
Fantastic. That would be wonderful.
Quería repetir eso.
Okay. So,
¿Quieres repetir qué es lo que les pides a los
yes. So I'm to some people who just arrived. This is our last class, of course, and I start thanking everyone. But this is our chance to address any issues, topics, speakers, whatever you want to ask about. It could be about what's happening in my own country in the coming presidential elections or in the congressional elections, how that is. It could be whatever, foreign policy. I'm open to anything, and I can share mine. It's just one opinion, but I'll try to be as balanced as I can.
Yes, I would like to comment to you about foreign the states now, the two wars, the Russian war and the Ukraine war. How the states, what point they stand at these two wars?
What point I missed the last part.
What point the states stand up?
Stand down?
Stand up,
Oh, okay.
which is more important for the state. Ukraine or Israel, or the goals are the same.
The question from Fernanda was, with two wars active in the United States, engaged in both, is there one that's more important, and how do we decide to support both?
Exactly.
I will give you my perspective and then try to share with you what I think is happening in our Congress right now. Bienvenidos. Gracias. We have some guests as well who arrived. From my perspective, the question was, again, with the two wars, what's the role of the United States in these? My own preference would be that our country, along with many other countries, I'll take Ukraine first. My own preference would be that our country, in the case of Ukraine, will continue the support. We just can't allow the kind of horrific acts that Russia has been doing, separating children from their parents, invading a foreign country, taking children away. The parents have no idea where the kids are. Bombing civilian targets, destroying civilian infrastructure. Unnecessarily and in an unjustified way. We cannot let that stand, or it will continue. We've learned that lessons over history about that. So I would like to see our country continue to fund the support of Ukraine, as other countries as well, because it's an international issue. That said, you may be aware in our Congress, ironically, the Republican Party mostly is trying to suggest we should cut funding for Ukraine. When I say ironically, it is because traditionally the Republican Party has been very vocally anti-communist. But since Donald Trump came in and he made friendly gestures to Vladimir Putin, the Republican Party has done two things. One, they've softened their criticism of Putin. And two, they've become more and more isolationist. The argument being, we should not get involved with international relations, international conflicts that are not our own. That's an enormous political shift in the politics of the Republican Party. The other thing they're doing now is insisting that any funding, this is the end of our year, of course, and we have theoretically, by law, are supposed to pass all of the spending legislation called appropriations bills. They're insisting that that border, southern border restrictions to stop illegal and undocumented immigration from the south be tied to funding for Ukraine, and that be separate from funding for Israel. I understand the concern about the border, but I think tying the two together is a bad message. Because if you're an ally, depending for your very survival on support from the United States or other countries, and all of a sudden you are then tied to other domestic issues that have nothing to do with your existential fight, the demoralizing effect it has on the populace, on the soldiers on the ground is extraordinary. And I think one of the lessons we've learned is that you can't feel you can count on the United States or other countries. That puts the world in danger. At the same time, I must say, the United States can't carry that alone. We just can't carry that burden by ourselves. It's financially infeasible. We frankly have depleted our own supply of ammunition, of missiles, of technology, etc. And if we were to face a serious international conflict, we're a bit more vulnerable, is the honest truth. And our adversaries, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, they know that. And so we have stretched ourselves. So I'd like to see the international community more engaged. The second question was about Gaza. Gaza and Israel. This is incredibly complex, as you know, and has been for a long time. What Hamas did was absolutely horrific, inexcusable, especially the reports of the sexual brutality that they engaged in, completely inexcusable, has to be condemned by everyone, and no excuses. At the same time, there are innocent civilians in Gaza who are suffering. And my personal belief is it was a mistake for the United States to veto the resolution from the Security Council calling for a ceasefire. I think that was a mistake. I think politically, morally, and policy-wise, it was a mistake. That's not the view of the majority of Congress, however. I'm a bit different than that. But I think we need to be more proactive about trying to achieve a peaceful resolution. The other thing is the level of destruction in Gaza is unimaginable. The infrastructure loss, water treatment, hospitals, you've seen the images. And that's going to take billions of dollars to repair. And then last but not least, when you're effectively imprisoned, because Gaza is basically a prison. The Egyptians won't let the Palestinians out to the border at Rafah. The Israelis obviously won't. The sea is locked up. So those poor people have no place to go. So when Netanyahu said, attention to civilians in Gaza, you have to evacuate, it was cynical. You can't evacuate. They've evacuated a long time ago. So the United States, I think, needs to show a different kind of moral leadership in that region, but I'm in a somewhat the minority. Thank you for the question.
Muchas gracias. Voy a hablar en español. Brian, en primer lugar, quiero que sepas que hay algunos legisladores, por ejemplo, de Venezuela, está Sandra Flores, que es asambleísta de Venezuela.
Gracias.
Obviamente ya dijimos Marciana Campagnoli de Argentina, bueno, está Víctor Albures de Guatemala, y aquí están Fernanda Ferrero, y está también aquí Néstor Palo, de Argentina, también ex legisladores. Lo que quería comentar, que me parece importante, y después también escuchar su opinión, es lo siguiente. Dos cosas importantes que han sucedido en la Argentina y que tal vez la visión desde los Estados Unidos es importante y también nosotros reflexionar en torno a lo que hemos visto en los Estados Unidos. La primera es que Argentina acaba de inaugurar un tiempo nuevo, claramente, que en mi opinión va más allá de esta presidencia del actual presidente Javier Milei. Creo que ha sido un cambio muy profundo, que tiene que ver con el rol del Estado. Y eso tiene dos partes. Una parte, el rol del Estado, desde el punto de vista de su funcionamiento. Entonces, lo que ha dicho el presidente, ha ganado las elecciones, que el Estado argentino funciona muy mal, que está en un pésimo estado para cumplir con sus funciones, para proveer servicios, etc. Y lo otro, ha dicho que quiere un Estado mucho más pequeño y que se dedique exclusivamente. Son dos cosas vinculadas al Estado. Con respecto a eso, ¿por qué es importante? Porque vamos hacia un proceso que va a requerir mucho expertise, sobre todo de conocer los que hacen mejor las cosas en el mundo, ¿no? Entonces, los países más avanzados tienen estados más eficientes. Casi no hay un país que sea pobre y tenga un estado eficiente, etcétera, ni tampoco hay un país exitoso y tenga un estado que no funciona. Entonces hay una lógica allí que cuanto mejor estado, más progreso. Entonces ahí en eso creo que los Estados Unidos y obviamente otros países del mundo en muchas cosas son ejemplificativos. O sea, nos sirven a nosotros como buena práctica y creo que va a ser muy necesario para el país tener acceso a esa información y tal vez apelo a tu propio liderazgo para ayudarnos con eso. En todos los campos. Y una reflexión importante, el Estado es el que desarrolla absolutamente todo, todas las políticas públicas. No hay ninguna que no le competa al Estado. Y cuando hablan, la gente pide, nos falta un modelo de desarrollo, y hay que definir esto, hay que definir lo otro, siempre está el Estado por medio. Si el Estado está roto, cualquier buena voluntad va a hacer las cosas mal porque es un aparato que está roto. Entonces, lo que haga, por más buenas intenciones, no va a funcionar. Hay que arreglar el Estado y en eso consiste el futuro. Y después, con respecto a las relaciones internacionales, también hay un cambio profundo, que tiene que ver con algo que zanjó ya Milei, nos guste o no, y veremos cómo reacciona el Congreso, etcétera, que hay algunos que tienen una postura de que la política exterior tiene que ser pragmática, y sobre todo por el comercio para países como la Argentina, más allá de las cuestiones de seguridad, como quieren los Estados Unidos. Y eso implica que es igual, de alguna manera, comerciar con uno u otro país independientemente de su posición geopolítica. Bueno, el nuevo presidente ha zanjado eso, porque dijo los valores de su política exterior son los de Occidente. Lo dijo claramente. ¿Y vamos a comerciar? Sí, obviamente promover, ayudar al sector privado, obviamente quien debe hacer comercial es el sector privado, desarrollar la economía, etcétera, el comercio internacional. Con lo cual, ya zanjó también el nuevo gobierno algo que era una gran discusión en la Argentina, ¿no? Bueno, porque algunos inclusive pretendían valores para la Argentina que bueno, son justo coinciden con los mismos enemigos del hemisferio occidental, ¿no? En algunos casos, ni siquiera la cuestión de un equilibrio o algo por el estilo. Bueno, es un tema más profundo que estoy simplificando, pero me parece que es muy importante. Y así también, si podemos aquí hablar sobre el futuro de la relación de Estados Unidos con la Argentina, las oportunidades para aquellos que se dedican a cuestiones del Estado, de cualquier poder, el poder judicial, el legislativo y por supuesto el ejecutivo. Me parece que es un buen escenario aquí de esta última clase para escuchar opiniones. Y por último está Moisés Benamor, de la OEA que mencionaba hace un rato, que me pidió especialmente que quiera hacer un comentario, Moisés, sí, acerca del programa.
Gracias, Juan de Dios. Bueno, Brian, un placer. Congratulations and enhorabuena, como decimos en español, por una iniciativa extremadamente importante. Yo creo que en estas últimas semanas, meses, hemos podido realmente conocer con detalle todo lo que fue el origen, el desarrollo, pero lo más importante son los desafíos y los retos que tiene la democracia de los Estados Unidos, que es una democracia líder y que en el mundo occidental pues es una fuente permanente de inspiración, ¿no? Y después de 200 años, obviamente, así como en su momento lo debió haber vivido Grecia o, o Roma, pues estamos ahora en el siglo XXI planteándonos cómo lograr sostenerla, ¿no? Ante tantas amenazas y tantos desafíos que no tenemos control sobre ellos, ¿no? Y creo que aprendimos mucho, la verdad. Yo creo que ha sido una estupenda iniciativa. Ojalá se pueda repetir, se pueda reforzar, por supuesto. Aprendimos de personas muy capaces, muy generosas para darnos su conocimiento, para explicarnos con detalle cosas que para unos que aún viviendo en los Estados Unidos no es fácil entender. Y así fue este programa, ¿no? Nos dio a quienes vivimos aquí, quienes respetamos mucho digamos, el compromiso democrático que ha tenido siempre Estados Unidos y sus personas, sus ciudadanos, conocer mejor por qué son así, qué les importa y qué les preocupa. Creo que ha sido en ese sentido una lección extremadamente importante. Pero también creo que nos dejó un sabor en la boca muy potente, que es que no hay diálogo político en este momento, ¿no? Que hay una polarización y una crispación política que no nos permite recuperar un valor de la democracia, que es el diálogo, el verdadero diálogo, que es la negociación, la tolerancia de pensar distinto, el respeto de quien piensa diferente a uno y buscar la visión de Estado y no de un partido o de una posición ideológica, ¿no? Sino pasar a entender que muchas de las grandes demandas que tiene la democracia en el siglo XXI es un problema de estados. Es un problema en donde los partidos políticos tienen que aprender otra vez a ceder, ¿no? Y no creer que son los que manejan la verdad absoluta dentro de estos paradigmas de libertad, de desarrollo, de inclusión, de paz, ¿no? De transparencia, sino que la transparencia se puede mirar desde distintas ideologías y coincidir en un punto en donde ambos entendamos que debemos ser transparentes, ¿no? Y eso es lo que nos permite precisamente el diálogo político. Y creo que siempre había eso en las consecuencias o en las conclusiones de cada participante, ¿no? Nos está faltando diálogo, no podemos ponernos de acuerdo, está siendo muy difícil lograr negociar algo y entonces vemos el resultado negativo de esa carencia, ¿no? Y por eso me parece tan importante rescatar mucho el valor del Parlamento, porque bueno, nosotros muchas veces ponemos la atención en Europa, pero es un sistema parlamentario en donde por lo menos la negociación tiene que estar en la agenda del día. En los sistemas presidenciales no sucede eso, ¿no? Un presidente, como he dicho Juan de Dios hace un rato, puede generar muchas políticas, pero todas esas políticas no pueden tener ningún resultado sin un legislativo que se las apoye, que se las norme, que se las legisle. Y entonces creo que mirar el Parlamento como ese espacio donde hay que recuperar la cohesión, ¿no? Donde hay que recuperar los momentos para ceder, aprender a perder y que esa pérdida de hoy puede ser la ganancia de mañana, esa parte nos hace mucha falta. Y nosotros siempre miramos al norte en ese sentido, ¿no? Siempre miramos lo que sucede en los Estados Unidos, porque, bueno, obviamente es una caja de resonancia para toda la economía, para la tecnología, para el crecimiento económico y, por supuesto, para la política. Yo a veces digo que tanto Estados Unidos quiso exportar su modelo político a Latinoamérica que terminó importando el modelo latinoamericano a los Estados Unidos. Y a veces vemos mucha de la diatriba del mensaje y del discurso político que parece uno piensa que está en un país latinoamericano. Entonces creo que en ese sentido hay que seguir trabajando con los parlamentarios. Cuando hablamos de 35 países que son miembros de la OEA, actualmente hay 32 países activos en la organización. Estamos hablando de menos de 5.000 parlamentarios. Y es una masa crítica que se puede trabajar, que se puede incidir, que se puede hacer advocacy, que se puede buscar la manera de encontrar champions que vuelvan a mirar a la democracia como un sistema que es el que realmente garantiza libertad, garantiza equidad y desarrollo y sobre todo prosperidad. Creo que la pandemia del COVID-19 nos demostró a todos que sin salud, sin capacidad de educarnos, de informarnos, etcétera, sin capacidad de transparencia de lo que hace un gobierno, es difícil pensar en que podemos ser prósperos, ¿no? Entendiendo esa prosperidad como todos estos elementos que nos integran como ciudadanos para ejercer plenamente nuestros derechos y cumplir con nuestras obligaciones. Entonces, me parece que seguir trabajando con parlamentos es clave. Y realmente ha sido para mí una experiencia extremadamente valiosa. Un hombre como tú, Brian, con la experiencia que tienes, con el conocimiento, pero sobre todo con esta sensibilidad de acercarte a un territorio que todavía es muy desconocido, lamentablemente, para la política de los Estados Unidos, pero que sé que hay dentro de cada uno de los principales partidos y sobre todo dentro de muchas de las agencias que trabajan el desarrollo desde Estados Unidos, sí hay mucho compromiso por una prosperidad de las Américas. Así que nuevamente gracias. Creo que más que una pregunta es esta reflexión la que quería hacer. Y quizás si puedo pensar en una pregunta es cómo lograr que los jóvenes, que al fin y al cabo son los que están siendo la transición del pasado al futuro, porque ya este joven no es necesariamente el actor clave del futuro, sino vienen otras generaciones detrás de él, pero cómo lograr que este joven realmente genere la empatía social, ¿no? O sea, creo que vivimos en un mundo de tanto individualismo que hace que no miremos mucho lo que le está pasando al vecino. Y es mucho lo que pasa en las generaciones de estos tiempos. Entonces, ¿cómo hacer eso? Y creo que esfuerzos como este realmente valen la pena. Así que nuevamente gracias y por supuesto a la Escuela de Gobierno, al Centro, a Juan de Dios, que es un actor clave para todos nosotros. Enhorabuena, Juan de Dios. Siempre es un orgullo tenerte como amigo, pero especialmente como referente en estas iniciativas que cada vez son mejores y mayores. Así que nuevamente gracias.
Gracias, Moises. Thank you so much. I'll speak English because my Spanish might fail me, but thank you for your insightful comments on so many, you addressed so many critical elements, and the main point being, of course, the importance of Parliament and the Congress as the people's form of government that needs to check the executive. And also I want to talk about that a little bit, and also interparliamentary exchanges, which are so important. First of all, I completely agree about the Parliament, about the role of Congress. In our Constitution, as you know, the first article is not the executive branch, it's the Congress. And the Congress traditionally has been the people's voice because we are directly elected by the people. We forget that the President of the United States is not directly elected. He's elected by the Electoral College, which is a very politically biased structure in the sense that different states have different relative power within the Electoral College, and it's not a popular vote. So, however, in my case, I was elected directly by the people. And that is true of most Congresses, and I place high value on that. Secondly, it's so important and so troubling, which many in this class have heard me say. You pointed out, Moises, two things that are both dangerous, I think. One, the division and the polarization in our society, the absolutism about that, one side must be right and the other side must be wrong, is very dangerous. Any democracy. I've heard a wonderful phrase called respectful curiosity, which means if I differ from someone, I don't assume that because we differ, we're enemies. I should assume you have an experience and a perspective that matters to you. How can I learn from that and listen to that? The second dangerous, but when we assume, I should say, that our side is right and the other side is necessarily all wrong, that's dangerous in two ways. One, you are elected. When I was first elected, I gathered my staff together and I said, listen, we ran as a Democrat. I ran as a Democrat, but every single person in our district deserves representation and respect. And I don't want ever to hear that my staff, my professional congressional staff, is treating someone with disrespect because they're from a different political party. And some of the first things I did surprised people. I reached out to people from the other side and said, let's work together, let's find common ground. And we did. Very surprising. People said, I can't believe you worked with that person. We share the same responsibility to help our constituents. So that's the first thing. The second thing, however, the other danger is if you combine the polarization with a cult of personality, with worshiping and obeying an individual and the role of president over and above the democratic process and the Constitution and the respect for one another, that's terribly dangerous. Because now the Congress is acting not as an independent body representing the people, but as someone pledging allegiance to a person over a constitution, and that's extremely dangerous. On almost September 11th, I actually think January 6th was worse than September 11th. Far worse, far worse. Not in the terms of number of fatalities, but in the terms of the significance. It's one thing to be attacked by another country. To be attacked by your own countrymen trying to overturn a democratic process is a worse experience. But part of what the problem there was, you saw flags with the United States of America, the famous American flag, with an image of the president over top of it. That the president is more important than the country. That's dangerous. So thank you for raising those issues, Moises. The other thing is your point about interparliamentary relationships. We do not do that enough, and we don't do it well enough in my country. I would like to see all members of Congress reflect respectful curiosity to other nations. When we come to other countries, let's learn from them. Let's see, how do you do your elections? You knew with confidence the outcome of your election by 8 o'clock on election night. We won't know sometimes, as you know, for weeks, because our system is different. I like your system better. And the delegation of members of Congress, the sense of how you conduct the elections in person with observers from all sides, rapidly counting them, I thought it was pretty good. So, but there are so many other things that we can learn. And if we can increase the interparliamentary exchange, direct interparliamentary exchange, I think that's important. One of the commitments that Juan and I have made to each other and to all of you is that we are going to try over time to reinstitute the U.S. participation in the IPU. And with Nestor Pearl here and Fernanda and their role in the IPU and other guests here, I think we have an opportunity to do that. It will take some time. We'll need champions. But, you know, in Congress, if nothing happens in my experience, nothing happens in Congress without a champion. But if you have champions, nothing is impossible. And we can work together to make that happen. The last thing I'll say, Moises, is thank you to yourself for your role in the Organization of American States and the important political and dialogue that you have engaged in for so many years. It's been an honor to hear your comments today, and I'm deeply impressed and moved by your thoughtful comments and input here. The last thing I'll say, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I'm struck by the painting behind you. It strikes me as an artistic metaphor for how I feel about my country today. It looks kind of like an American flag, but the themes are there with the colors, but it's gotten a little mixed up, but I very much like the painting. And I'm grateful for your comments and for your service. And I hope we'll continue personally to stay in touch.
Brian, tenemos a Víctor Albures de Guatemala, que ya lo
Sí.
conocen muy bien, pero quiero simplemente contarles que está Marjorie Chávez, por ejemplo, que ha sido no solo asambleísta del Ecuador, sino además quien presidió el grupo de amistad del Ecuador con los Estados Unidos.
Oh, wonderful.
Así que para que sepas, también conocen muy bien.
All right. So we start with Victor, and then we also see Ana Torres de Ecuador.
Perfecto.
So, Víctor, adelante. Y gracias, Víctor. En todas las clases.
Hola, Brian, Juan de Dios y Moisés, creo que me sumo lo expresado por ustedes el día de hoy. Con Moisés y pues Juan de Dios nos une una amistad, una relación profesional que yo reconozco mucho como guatemalteco. Y a Brian y a Juan de Dios, muchísimas gracias por darnos la oportunidad de este proyecto tan interesante que va nutriendo la experiencia de nuestros países para generar mejores políticas públicas y apoyar la función, en mi caso, de los diputados del Congreso de Guatemala. En lo que ustedes comentaban hace un momento, cabalmente Guatemala está en los ojos del mundo. La semana anterior hubo una visita a Guatemala de una comisión bipartidista del Congreso de los Estados Unidos de América por este problema que tenemos de las elecciones generales, que aún está un tema bastante complejo. Tenía una consulta, Brian. Hay una noticia, no sé si es actual, que hoy me llamó la atención, que estuvo circulando en Guatemala, de un congresista republicano, Matt Gaetz, no sé si se pronuncia Gaetz o Getz, que lo que propone... Sí, que él propone una ley para eliminar la Agencia de los Estados Unidos para el Desarrollo, la USAID. ¿Qué opinión tienes al respecto de esta iniciativa de ley?
Proponió, yo no conozco personalmente, pero ya no sé muy bien quién es Matt Gaetz. ¿Cuál fue su propuesta?
USA, que desaparece USA.
Abolir USA.
Sí, prefería quitar el fondo del sueldo de Matt Gaetz. Lo que pasa es esto: todos los conservadores pretenden que si solamente cancelan el presupuesto por el USAID, podemos balanzar el presupuesto. Es una locura. Los gastos de ayuda internacional son menos que un poco de porcentaje de un poco de porcentaje. Y nos repagan exponencialmente. Y además es el cosa correcto hacer. Como dice la Biblia, ¿no? Si tiene mucho, tiene que la responsabilidad de dar a otros. Es desgracia. I'll go back to English. I'm sorry. Matt Gaetz is typical of the new politician in our country, more so on the Republican side. I sound partisan, but it's just true. There are maybe 10 or more members of Congress who their entire focus is how can I get on television and say dramatic things so I'll be quoted on social media and maybe get a job on a conservative television station one day. If you look at, he's not respected within his own party. And his proposal is ridiculous. It will not balance our budget. USAID does remarkable work. Victor, I think maybe one of the things I was going to talk about today, some of you know, and I've talked about this before, but let me repeat it again. In addition to doing this class, what I am most focused on is trying to create exhibitions and museums to honor service in all of its forms. We have many monuments and museums around the world and in our country to honor military service, and that's appropriate. I respect our military immensely. We've had some powerful speakers from our military here. But there are people who serve in so many other ways. And in the case of USAID, there are Americans volunteering and working, and they work with local partners, as you know, Victor, and they do so many good things. They help with agriculture, they help with sanitation, they help with education. They're there after disasters, after wars. They help in so many ways. It's America at its very best is when we're generous. And for a country as rich as ours, as powerful as ours, to suddenly say, oh, we have no responsibilities. It is the height of selfishness. And it's one of my concerns about my own country. That if you ask Americans from my generation, but maybe any generation, can you recall a single quotation from a presidential, you just had a presidential inauguration yesterday. And although I have personally some concerns about some things Mr. Millet has said, I respected his call to the public to try to set things straight. But I will tell you, if you had to ask Americans, what is the one phrase that you remember from any presidential inauguration, I know exactly what that phrase is. It was John Fitzgerald Kennedy who said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And the same should be true of America in regard to the world. We should have a moral sense of responsibility to share and share our resources, our experience, our knowledge, and lift up the world. And so I don't think, I have to say one positive thing. For many years, a group mostly of entirely of conservatives, Democrats never call for an end to USAID. It's just, I can't think of a single Democrat who has ever called for that. But there have been many conservative Republicans who have done this for many years. And you know what happens, Victor, is they get at a town hall or a meeting of Republicans and they say, why are we sending money to other countries that hate us when we have hungry people here at home? And people applaud. But at the same time, ironically, some of those people say we should be a Christian nation. I thought the message of Christ was a message of generosity. You know what, I need to get an adapter so I can plug this to charge my battery. Can you yeah, one of the technicians. I thought the message of Christ and of other faiths was of generosity. And so, Victor, I would not worry that Matt Gaetz is going to have any success. There have been very many Republicans. While some have called for the termination of USAID, there have been many Republicans who have been very adamant, staunch supporters of, I think you just lost my, that's okay, it's still working. They've been staunch supporters of USAID. And certainly under the Biden administration, it'll never happen. But Matt Gaetz he's a symptom of what's wrong with our politics today, with someone of his cynical attitude to get elected. Thank you, Victor, for your, not just this question, but your very thoughtful questions through the entire course. It's been a pleasure.
Anita.
Oh, I can't see my screen start.
All right. Anita Torres, por favor, adelante. Un placer verte aquí.
My battery's going low, so we'll have to get it.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Listo. Muchas gracias, Juan de Dios, primero siempre por tener en cuenta el sentido de responsabilidad académica y cómo la academia puede contribuir en los parlamentos. En Ecuador tuvimos una crisis bastante fuerte, hubo una muerte cruzada, que es decir, el Ejecutivo disolvió, el presidente de la República disolvió al Legislativo y durante 6 meses gobernó a través vía decreto, lo que ha ocasionado un montón de crisis administrativa, temas de corrupción, porque no tenía un ente fiscalizador, porque la Asamblea no estaba cumpliendo su papel en ese momento. La Asamblea se acaba de posicionar el 17 de noviembre y justamente yo me vuelvo a incorporar en la Asamblea porque he sido funcionaria legislativa por algunos años en los temas de comunicación política. Entonces, en esta nueva vinculación mía, la hago a la Comisión justamente de Relaciones Internacionales y Movilidad Humana. Entonces, por ahí quiero hacer más bien la pregunta a Brian y Juan de Dios en el sentido de cómo nosotros podemos, desde nuestros parlamentos latinoamericanos, contribuir al fortalecimiento de la política pública y de la legislación para evitar la salida de nuestros compatriotas hacia las fronteras mexicanas y hacia Estados Unidos, y cómo Estados Unidos, frente a la presentación de la propuesta de ley Dignity, la modificación de la propuesta de ley Dignity, que es una propuesta bipartidista, encabezada, si no me equivoco, por una de las congresistas que es María Elvira Salazar, cómo ustedes desde allá ven esta ley y qué posibilidades hay efectivamente de que los migrantes que ya están en Estados Unidos, que han contribuido, que han pagado taxes, que han, digamos, han hecho patria en Estados Unidos, puedan tener su estatus migratorio o cambiar su estatus migratorios para que salgan de las sombras. Un poco esa sería mi reflexión. Si el cambio de gobierno obviamente afectará a esta propuesta de modificación de la ley Dignity, ¿y qué va a pasar en las fronteras? Nosotros tenemos una patrulla fronteriza que muchos compatriotas de Ecuador, de Colombia, de Perú, de Argentina, de Venezuela están todavía en la zona de frontera o están en estos sitios de detención provisional sin tener una persona que pueda hacerles como servirles de sponsors para que puedan trabajar legalmente en Estados Unidos. Y tienes personas que ya están 8 meses, 1 año sin primero conocer el idioma, sin saber los procesos. ¿Cómo puedes fortalecer también esto para que la gente que está ahí o retorne a sus países de forma segura o si ingresa a Estados Unidos, ingrese a contribuir con la economía de Estados Unidos? Hemos visto noticias que niños ecuatorianos están vendiendo caramelos, están vendiendo chupetes, dulces en los semáforos del Times Square. Lamentablemente en América Latina es, digamos, normal ver a los niños vendiendo en las calles, pero en Estados Unidos esto nunca ha sucedido, porque claro, ahí puedes tener demandas por abuso infantil. Sin embargo, existe esta problemática, cómo los Estados Unidos van a contribuir y a seguir contribuyendo en solucionar o en dar un estatus migratorio legal, o en aprobar la ley Dignity, en fortalecer fronteras. O sea, mi pregunta es, digamos, como que es muchas reflexiones, porque desde los parlamentos nosotros tenemos que hacer lo nuestro, que es fomentar leyes para empleo seguro, para garantizar seguridad, para garantizar educación, pero ¿cómo Estados Unidos, frente a esta realidad y a tanta gente que está en sus fronteras y a tanta gente que ya está en sus países trabajando, puede o no aprobar la ley Dignity? Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a usted. Are we going to get?
Yes.
No, that's good.
Look, I called them already.
Okay, super. So it's an excellent question. Are you able to see my image or is it okay?
Your image?
Yeah. I can't tell. I have no
Do
screen.
you have an image there?
No, I'm dark.
Oh, okay.
So,
You can talk
okay,
anyway.
So the issue of immigration, thank you for raising the question and for your insights about, oh, great. Oh, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Because mine, I think, is dead. So thank you for raising the question. Immigration has long been a difficult issue for us. Especially as you know, under Donald Trump, it became probably the signature issue of Donald Trump when he first ran for office. He recognized frankly, the racist fear and the class distinction. You look at people who have supported Donald Trump over the years, it tends to be non-college educated white males. That's his strongest base. And there is a sense among that part of our electorate that their way of life is being threatened. Well, it's being threatened not because of immigration, but really mostly through technological change and the loss, frankly, of union jobs that used to pay. You could work at an automobile factory in the past and earn enough money to buy a home, have a nice car, send your children to college if that's where they wanted to go. But we would call it a middle-class lifestyle. Mechanization in the automotive industry and in many others took away a lot of jobs. If you look at many automobile factories now, they're machines, they're robots building the cars. The loss, and then there was some export of jobs. Under NAFTA and other programs, manufacturers realized they could pay less wages, but still decent wages in local communities if they built their cars or other devices apart from the country. People like Bill Clinton supported NAFTA and other trade issues, partly because that was a way to lift people out of poverty, not just through aid, but by creating economic opportunity. So what happens is that people who are struggling economically, the middle class is shrinking a little bit in our country, feel they need to blame someone. And it's easy to blame immigrants. And so they feel like, okay, my job or my way of life is being threatened. I'm going to blame immigrants. There are also cultural differences. People are not, in some parts of our country, to be perfectly honest, people are not used to seeing people of different ethnic backgrounds. At a bit of a risk here, it's very interesting to be here in Argentina. I don't see many Black people here in Argentina. Very, very few. In our country, there are schools where you have 40 different languages in one elementary school or high school, 40 different languages. The level of immigration is enormous. We have, in my kids, the public school my children attended when they were younger had people from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Laos, from the Philippines, from Syria, from Iraq, from Mexico, from Guatemala, from Venezuela, from Sudan, from Ethiopia. It really was like the United Nations there. When you went to it, and we would have cultural evenings where each culture would present their food or their dance or music. For me, that was wonderful. And for my wife, it was fantastic. Our kids can learn about other cultures, make friends from who spoke different languages. But for many people in parts of America, especially the rural parts, they were not used to seeing people from different countries, different dress, different language, etc. So Donald Trump took advantage of that and said, basically, the biggest threat to American way of life, as he would describe it, was illegal immigration. And some Republicans went farther than illegal immigration and said all immigration is bad. We want no immigration at all, forgetting that much of our economic activity has been developed by immigrants and that in some way we were all immigrants. So where are we now? Immigration continues to be the number one issue for the Republican Party politically. And frankly, neither party has a solution. The idea that we're going to build a giant wall and somehow the entire length of the southern and the northern border is enormous. We don't have a lot of illegal immigration, partly because it's cold and there are forests and there's not anybody up there wanting to come down. The Canadians don't want to come to the Americans. They're very happy in Canada. But the idea that we'll solve immigration with a wall, I don't think is the solution. My own belief of the solution is something that will make the far left and the far right crazy, but I think it's the solution. And it's a national identification card like you have here. Why? Because if you have a national identification card, you can make sure that someone who has a job has the right to be in the country. You can make sure that, and those people then will be treated fairly and respectfully. You combine that with the temporary worker program with a valid identification, and then you have workers who can come up and work in your agricultural industry or your tourism industry or other industries, but with respect, and they pay taxes and they obey the law. The far left will think that's big government. The far right will think that's big government, but many countries on earth have a national ID. And I think it's the best way to manage undocumented immigration.
I'm happy with that. We are good.
You're good at that. I think I think it would be very easy. I think it would be easy. The irony is, the ironic thing is, the same people who would say, oh, I don't want a national ID, the government could track me, every day of their life. They give so much personal information, not to the government, but to private corporations and who knows who. Let's see, is my location tracking on? Oh, yes, because that allows me to use my GPS. Let's see, do I want instant notification? Oh, yes. Do I want to allow tracking cookies? Oh, yes. But not the government. No, Meta can know it. Twitter can know it. Apple can know it. Amazon can know it, but not the government. So for me, if we want to deal with immigration, first, treat human beings as human beings. One of the horrible things Donald Trump did, horrible, was imply that people who were immigrating legally or illegally were bad human beings. The people coming from Latin American countries or other countries to the US are doing exactly what most Americans would do if their family were threatened with gang violence, if their family were impoverished, if their family needed health care, etc. So stop the dehumanization of immigration. Second, provide legal pathways for people who obey the law and pay taxes to live and visit. Third, help Latin American countries, especially those who are plagued by gang violence, by drug violence. And let's be honest, the drug violence is fueled by our country's demand for drugs. And the weapons are often fueled by our weapons manufacturers. So we've got to help reduce the demand for immigration, support people who do come, and stop the dehumanization. But that's not happening right now because it's a political issue right now. And because if you propose the national ID, which is the fastest solution, it will drive people crazy on both sides. So it's a great question. It will continue to be in this next election, the biggest issue for the Republican Party. And that's why they're withholding aid to Ukraine because of immigration. In fact, a new Republican senator named Vance from Ohio just this week said he won't support any money going to Ukraine to defend its borders when we aren't defending our borders. Last I checked, immigrants from Latin America are not launching rockets at American cities. We're not stealing American children and taking them back to educate them to speak Russian. We're not raping American civilians in acts of war. The Russians are doing all those things to Ukraine. But nevertheless, that's our politics. So sorry for the long answer, but it's the funny.
Brian, we have to Suraj Samin and to Juan Wilbur.
Okay, did we come? Okay, yes, Suraj.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to extend my profound gratitude to Congressman Brian Baird and Professor Juan de Dios for their exceptional instruction classes. In my particular context, these classes stand out as amazing classes and enlightening and enriching learning experience. I'm really grateful of these classes, and the presentation, the guest was amazing, and the best thing that I had the chance to freely ask my question about my country, because in American study program, we can see the political exterior of United States of America is more in case of Afghanistan, more relative to Afghanistan because of 2-decade intervention in Afghanistan. And my question, I would like to know the personal opinion of Congressman Brian Baird. In case of Afghanistan, the first thing that, will the United States of America let the Taliban to grow up in the way that they are now? Because 2 days ago, if I'm not wrong, the Foreign Minister of Iran, they mentioned in their announcement that the Taliban are the current government and the real governor of Afghanistan, and we need to negotiate more with them. And in 19th of November, if I'm not wrong about the date, Donald Trump also mentioned in his election that if we get if we win the election, he will get back the background base to have eyes on China, which is the background base is one of the biggest base in Asia, and also it's about 2 hours away from the China nuclear base. And I would like to know also about the Biden. He is not mentioning anything about the strategy of the United States of America belong to Afghanistan. And as we observed in 9/11, the first goal of United States of America was to self-defense from the terrorist groups. And nowadays we can see that group, the Taliban group, still exists in Afghanistan. And 2-decade achievement of United States of America in Afghanistan was democracy, and also it was human rights. I would like to know about your opinion that will the United States of America will do something to maintain their achievement during 2 decades in Afghanistan. And also when we are observing that Iran, Russia, and China, they are so close with the Taliban, and it will be in the future, it's clear that there will be again the big danger for United States of America. And what do you think, what the strategy may take if the Donald Trump win, he will negotiate? What negotiate will be? Maybe he will recognize the Taliban as a governor to take back the background base, or maybe he negotiate in another way. What do you think about this? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suraj. As you know, the U.S. engagement in the conflict in Afghanistan was our longest military engagement in our history, and it failed. It failed for a lot of reasons, in no small part because President Bush took the United States into Iraq, and that distracted our focus from Afghanistan. It failed in part because the neighbors around Afghanistan did not want to see us succeed, and they profited from the conflict in both sides. Pakistan is the main example of that, I believe, but other nations in the region did. It failed in part because of huge cultural differences in the values. We forget in the United States that our arrival at democracy followed hundreds of years of evolution of Western thinking about human rights, about the role of government, about religion, about relationships between people, and that evolution of thinking and culture did not occur in the same path in other countries. And so to try to import our democratic values and values about rights of women, which I'm passionate about, but into a country where those have been seen in a much different light is really quite a bit to ask. And on top of that, to try to maintain a conflict overseas, it's hard you've been there, Suraj, you know, but it's hard to imagine how much infrastructure the United States brought to, you mentioned, I think, Bagram Air Force Base. When I would fly into Bagram on congressional trips there, we basically built an entire airport with armaments and protection and airplane hangars and air traffic control and internet connectivity. And if you landed at Bagram Air Force Base, it was as busy as Chicago International Airport at times. You would see C-130 transports coming in, fighters going off, helicopters. It was just a very busy place, and all of that had to be flown there. All of it had to be flown to Afghanistan. And so maintaining that conflict from so far away, especially in an area where, as General McChrystal pointed out in his marvelous presentation to us, the British failed in Afghanistan. The Russians failed in Afghanistan. We failed in Afghanistan. Now, China and Russia, Pakistan is pretty scared, I think, by what's happening in Afghanistan, but Russia and China certainly do not care about democratic values. They're not going to say, oh, we won't trade with rare earth minerals with the Taliban. If Afghanistan's got rare earth minerals, which it does, the Chinese and the Russian are not going to say, but the Taliban don't respect the rights of women, don't respect freedom of speech, don't respect freedom of religion. Russia and China do not care. But if they don't care and they're willing to fund the Taliban, our ability militarily or politically to overcome that, Suraj, going to be very limited. I'm sorry to say. I hate it. But the practical reality on the ground is If one superpower with 1.3 billion people and the second largest economy in the world, and another superpower with nuclear weapons and a brutal mercenary force, and a third nuclear power in the form of Pakistan adjacent, if they don't want to succeed there, I don't honestly, Suraj, and I hate to say this to you, my friend, and you are my friend, I don't know what we can do externally to bring about the change. Now, I don't think we should or will recognize the Taliban. But let me take this more broadly, and I've said this before. My own, and I said it in the context of Matt McWilliams' talk and a reference to Ann Applebaum's book. I think the democratic, freedom-loving nations of the world need to form an alliance that is military, that is strategic, economic, and we need to trade among each other, and we need to limit our trade with countries like Russia, China, and others. Not overnight, but we must not be dependent on them. I don't think we should buy products from them that are made under unacceptable, humane conditions. And I don't think we should recognize or enable countries like the Taliban to participate as equal partners in international organizations. Gracias. So, Suraj, I think, sadly, I think the hardest part is once a totalitarian regime like the Taliban, thank you, gets established and then uses the force of the political state, especially with modern surveillance, modern intelligence gathering, control over the internet, control of communication, and control of the religious institutions in the country, which is the same in Iran, it becomes very difficult to overthrow that unless the people rise up themselves in some way to do so. But our ability, Suraj, and I just have to be honest with you, there is no appetite among the American public for us to go in militarily into Afghanistan. Covert support, if reliable insurgencies could be created in Afghanistan, covert support is possible, but as you know painfully well, the Taliban have strengthened their hold on, as I understand it, on most of Afghanistan right now. And we are facing the awareness, we the American people, but I think we the free-loving democratic world are facing the awareness that externally, militarily trying to restore democracy is very difficult. And it's also, as you know well, very fragile and easy to lose a democracy. So I think we're going to have to form this kind of alliance. And I think that struggle is going to last quite a long time.
Brian, I'm so sorry. I would like to say something to Suraj. Important, Suraj, it's true what Brian is saying, but in my opinion, think about, for example, the people in East Germany. No, that probably many of them thought that we'll never be free again. Think about plenty of examples in history. So I think, and this is for Argentina also, it doesn't matter if the people living today are going to see the change or not, but they need to fight for the future generations like it was with the ones who, the founding fathers everywhere, in the United States, in Argentina, and other parts of
South
the world.
Africa,
South Africa,
Poland.
Yeah, thinking ahead 100, a century, 2 centuries ago, behind, future. So sorry about that. So I think it's important to never, never stop fighting. In my opinion, it doesn't matter if the United States today cannot, of course, do something military speaking, but there are plenty of things to do to fight against intolerance, and autocracy and against the bad guys. But I'm sure about that. That's important. In Argentina, it's pretty common to say, okay, but there is hope. No, I don't want to see it. Many people around me, friends, everybody says, I'm not going to see it. People from my generation or older or even young people is saying that. It doesn't matter. Probably we will not see the change, but we need to fight, to change the country for better.
Thank you.
Right, Suraj, and And that's how it's going to happen. There's going to have to be a movement. It's happening a little bit in Iran right now as women stand up and insist that they have rights. And sadly, it happens at enormous human cost. People risk their lives, they risk their freedom, and it's going to have to come from within. But the international community has a role to play. It wasn't just Nelson Mandela who freed himself. It was the international community who said, if you want to engage in apartheid, you will not participate in the Olympics. You will not be welcome in international economic zones. We will not buy your products. So that, Suraj, is what we need to do. The challenge is the dictatorial autocrats make it harder to succeed in that because that threatens them as well. But Juan is exactly right. We have to continue as individuals to try to make a difference.
Lulu, and after that, probably we can do the break.
Yes, let's do that.
Bueno, muchas gracias a Brian, a Juan de Dios y a la institución por permitirnos estar aquí y aprender. Es un lujo. Y una de las preguntas, ayer se cumplieron 40 años del proceso democrático en Argentina, yo tengo 60 años, tenía 20 en ese momento, y con esperanza fui a la Plaza de Mayo el 10 de diciembre de 1983. Todo un acontecimiento importante a los 20 años. Hoy tengo 60 y se abre una nueva expectativa, pero ya no me quedan 40 años, salvo que la medicina avance muchísimo. Entonces, el tema es así, ¿cómo podemos hacer? Porque hemos visto que en algunos sectores, en las charlas, se habló de la baja aceptación en la sociedad de la democracia, que no tenía mucha aceptación en algunos niveles de la sociedad, por la desilusión que había sufrido la sociedad en el ejercicio democrático de los distintos gobiernos. Entonces, hoy tenemos factores que hacen que pueda uno caer en esa, no en los gobiernos militares ya en Latinoamérica, no creo que exista esa posibilidad, pero sí en autocracias, como la que a mi entender se acaba de ir. Es decir, una democracia formal, pero no material, donde las instituciones no funcionaban en pleno. Hoy se abre una nueva perspectiva. Ahora, siempre está el riesgo, el crimen organizado transnacional, que opera como una gran multinacional y en la región como algo regional, y se adhiere a la corrupción, eso genera pobreza. Las ayudas de Estados Unidos han sido muchas, pero muchas veces caen en corrupción en los países latinoamericanos y desaparece la ayuda. De hecho, nosotros en la década del 70 teníamos un 70% de clase media y hoy tenemos aparentemente un 30% con suerte. Entonces, ¿cómo se ha deteriorado paralelamente con el proceso democrático? No por culpa del proceso democrático, sino por quienes ejercieron el poder de mala manera y que, no respetando las instituciones, han degradado a la sociedad argentina, esto es mi opinión, a niveles de pobreza, como lo ha dicho el presidente ayer, terribles, escatológicos, y donde ha dicho, prefiero decir una verdad dolorosa a una mentira piadosa. Ahora, ¿cómo podemos hacer nosotros, aquí desde este pequeño lugar, y usted como congresista norteamericano ya retirado, pero que siguen haciendo cosas por los Estados Unidos y por el mundo, para cooperar, para que no vuelva a pasar lo mismo? Estos 40 años fueron cosas buenas y también hemos llegado a esto. Entonces, no caer en gobiernos militares, pero no caer en autocracias formalmente democráticas, pero institucionalmente casi nulas, como la que hemos tenido. Y hemos salido, es una esperanza. Pero, ¿cómo podríamos hacer una concientización, por ejemplo, para que los corruptos no se sientan tan seguros de que en una sociedad donde la justicia, entre comillas, como abogado le digo, casi no existe para los corruptos, hacer algún acuerdo? Ellos temen como temían los narcotraficantes colombianos al proceso de extradición y el Plan Colombia cuando se los extraditaba. ¿Habrá alguna posibilidad de cooperar, digo Argentina, ¿no?, con Estados Unidos para que los que son corruptos tengan la posibilidad, sin que esto signifique violentar el principio de territorialidad de la ley penal argentina. Pero bueno, hay algo tenemos que hacer en conjunto, porque si no el sistema va a fracasar y corremos serios riesgos. Entonces, la corrupción mata. La corrupción lleva a pobreza extrema. 7 de cada 10 chicos no comen. Y si comen mal, luego no van a tener una formación. Entonces va a ser terrible. Entonces, Estados Unidos, ¿cómo podríamos hacer para que esto, concientizándolo, quizás con campañas desde allí, desde aquí, que es corrupto, no la va a sacar barata? Es decir, puede ser juzgado también aquí o en Estados Unidos. De alguna manera, ¿hay alguna legislación que se pueda aplicar, como los extraditables en aquel momento en Colombia, que temían tanto, y entonces que los corruptos empiecen a temer, y cuando llega el dinero para la ayuda, realmente vaya la ayuda?
So you covered a lot. All of it very important. I've said before in this class, and I really believe it, the number one criteria for any democratic society is a commitment to serve the public, not yourself. The number one. In the Latin, sine qua non. Why? Because if people use the democratic process to gain power, they will then use that power to undermine the democratic process, or to advance, or to keep it in an imaginary democratic process, but they at the enrichment of themselves and of others. So the first thing is we have to select candidates for office and parties that are committed to serving others, not just for party power and not for personal enrichment. Second, you have to have laws that are enforced, so if people violate the law to personally enrich themselves or their friends, they go to jail. The mere fact that they are not, they're in a political office doesn't protect them from criminal trial if they break the law. Beyond that, though, there are certain structural issues, and correct me if I'm wrong. I was shocked to learn, I think it's true, but correct me. My friends were educating me the other night, that whether or not someone receives social benefits here under the plan can be determined by a third person deciding whether or not they participated in a certain political activity or not. If that's true, that's corrupting. We would never have that. If I'm eligible for Social Security or Medicare or my taxes, there's no way under current administration that the tools of government are going to be used against me to deny my Social Security, to deny my retirement benefits, to prosecute me for paying taxes, etc. Unfortunately, right now we have a former president and presidential candidate who's talking about using the tools of government as retribution, as I've talked about here. So you have to structure your government in such a way that the power of government cannot be used to foster corruption, to favor one side or another. If Juan and I are both applying for a job in the government to help write software for the government, she should not be able to say, well, who did you vote for? She should have to say, if she's going to be the hiring, well, which one of you writes the better software? And that should be the only criteria. So you have to have a what we call civil service system that rewards competence, not political affiliation. You have to have social programs that don't create dependencies on politicians. So you have to restructure a lot of that. There is a commission back to one of your earlier questions. Our Congress itself needs to modernize, so that we've created a committee, and I'm going to try to get, this is not the end of our relationship because this class is ending. I want to be a resource in any way I can going forward. So if there are issues that we do well that I can share, I want to be able to help make those contacts. And similarly, there are issues that Argentina does beautifully that I want to share with my colleagues back in the US.
Argentina and the region.
In the region, exactly. Actually, thank you so much, Juan. The whole region, that applies, Juan. The Latin America, Caribbean region. We should have these interchanges, and I want to help try to create that. So, for example, my friend Derek Kilmer, a current member of Congress, created a committee in the Congress called the Committee on Modernization. I think I've talked about it a little bit before. The committee was designed to say, not how does one party gain advantage over another party, but how can we make our Congress work better for the good of everyone? How can we make it more efficient to debate laws, to involve the public, to use technology more effectively for the good of the public? They structured this committee interestingly. They said there will be the exact same number of Democrats as Republicans. That is rare in our Congress. Whichever party is in the majority structures the committee and says, okay, if we have a 60% majority in numbers in the House, then on every committee, there will be at least a 60% majority of our members so that we control every committee. Well, in the Committee to Modernize Congress, it's exactly 50-50. Regardless of which party is in the majority, that committee is equal. In that committee, there are two co-chairs, not one chair and someone below him or her, two equal chairs. When they have committee hearings, normal committee hearings now, in the normal committees, I'm sorry to say, are political theaters. They're political theater. You see it. If you watch CNN or C-SPAN, rather, you can see the Republicans call witnesses who try to make the Democrats look stupid. The Democrats can call witnesses who try to make the Republicans look stupid. And bringing witnesses together to actually try to solve problems is rare. In the Committee on Modernization, both parties can bring witnesses, but the general sense is the witnesses are there for technical knowledge and expertise. And not only that, they don't only do hearings. Hearings in American Congress are mostly wastes of time, almost entirely waste of time. Because the experts get 5 minutes to speak. Someone who's spent their entire life studying, I could call the leading expert in the world to my committee to hear from them when I chaired the Committee on Science. Well, if you've spent your entire life on something and I know nothing about it, and I'm going to write a law to regulate what you know far more, I should shut up and listen. I should be quiet and give you a half hour. And then we should ask intelligence questions. No, what happens is you get 5 minutes and then we will speak. Those of us in the Congress will speak about something we know nothing about that our staff wrote a speech about. Truly. But on the Modernization Committee, it's different. On the Modernization Committee, they have open discussion. They have experts who interact for a half hour sometimes. They invite civic society, people like Beth Novak and Marcy Harris, and people that we've heard from, to come in and say, help us understand how to do this better. And they have dialogue and interaction. It's a good model. And interestingly, how it will work in a multi-party Congress is an interesting question. But I think I wrote to Derek Kilmer, the chair, and he said he's interested. So he might come down. Those are some ways we can try to make it work better. I'm also going to compliment you about another thing here. You have an active and vibrant newspaper system here with multiple newspapers of different perspectives, with many journalists, with investigative journalism. Never lose that. I can't say most, but many American major cities have no active independent newspapers anymore. Small cities don't have any, many small cities, many big cities, Portland, Oregon, which is a big city, lost its major newspaper. Denver, Colorado, the capital city of Colorado, lost its major newspaper. Most major cities have only one newspaper. Seattle used to have 2 or 3, and then several smaller weeklies. We are losing our newspapers. Don't lose your newspaper. The other thing is, I have no idea where all the money came from to fund all these elections I saw. But you must, I have no idea how you put so many giant posters up on the sides of walls and on every stand and on buses and on TV ads. I don't know about your campaign finance system, but if it's not transparent, it's dangerous. And it needs to be transparent. It needs to be very transparent so you know who's spending the money, who's getting the money, and you need strict laws to make sure money's, if I use campaign contributions for my own benefit, I go to jail in the United States. I mean, literally, I will go to jail if they catch me. But they catch you because people look and they say, we have civic society that says, let's look at how, I have to make a report that says how almost every penny was spent. And if I say, you know, some category, somebody's going to look at that and say, wait a second, why were you doing this? So have those laws that defeat corruption, have a civil service society based on merit, have committee processes that allow real discussion, have a vibrant free press that investigates people, which you have a lot already, but that's a long answer. And we need to do more of it right now. That was forgive the long answer. That's
No, wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
Shall we take a break?
Yeah, because it's ready now.
Yeah, we'll take a 15-minute break, and we are at what time right now? Come back together at 10 till or minus LDS. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Estamos yendo.
Sorry, it ran a little long here. Coffee takes time, I guess. Someone with other questions? Want to offer? Yeah, sure. You're welcome to take other questions from else. Yes, please.
Yes, Congressman, I was wondering, we talked about this international divide between democracies and autocracies, and this idea of building coalitions between democracies and the West in general. So what do you think the future 5 to 10 years of the US-China relationship is going to look like? The US is doing a de-risking, that they call it now, first decoupling, now de-risking. There seems to be a general consensus between both parties of the potential dangers of China. So what do you think the relationship is going to be like? And if there is a consensus in Washington regarding China and the potential risks and competition with the US?
Yes, it's an excellent question. I'll repeat it just in case. The question was, what does he see? What I personally see as the future for US-China relations 10 years from now? That there seems to be a recognition of the mutual risks of aggression. One of the challenges that there was a marvelous article written more than 20 years ago now by a gentleman named Andy Grove, who was one of the co-founders of Intel.
Again, the name?
Andy Grove, Grove, was one of the founders of Intel. He wrote this piece in Business Week about 20 years ago. It's not super well known. It was absolutely brilliant. And here was his thesis. His thesis was that those of us in the West assume that democracy is the ultimate form of government and that free enterprise capitalism is the best possible economic system. When we engaged with open trade with China, and when we opened our educational system in China, and to this day, if you go to our university, the University of Washington, you will see an enormous number of Chinese students there. Very many Chinese students. The theory was, we will share our knowledge, and we'll share openly our knowledge with the world, and that will lead to more minds, more good minds, coming up with more good ideas, solving more diseases, creating new economies, etc. there was also a theory that people who lived in free democratic societies would carry back those free democratic values to their country. And we've seen it happen in some places. This is back to the foreign aid question. Where people came to the United States on scholarship, some of the people here in this room have been scholars in study abroad, and it can build great friendships. But not if, when you go back to your own country and you say, you know, I was in this great country called the United States of America, and the people there could criticize their leadership. The press could write investigative articles about corruption in the government. You could sing rock lyrics that had a different language in it. You could make controversial movies. It was great. But then the government of that country is going to say to you, we don't do that here. And if you want to do that here, you could be imprisoned, or you will not get a job with the government, or you will not get a job with the private sector, and your family will be punished. So our theory that these people who studied internationally are good people is true, would then go back and take democracy, forgot where we were sending them back to. And so Andy Grove's premise was this, that our assumption that free enterprise is the best economic system and democracy is the best political system. What happens when it runs into a country that does not believe in democracy and subsidizes their enterprises with state funds? And his point was, if you take the case of China, which does not respect intellectual property rights, which subsidizes very strategically certain industries and targets certain industries in the West and says, for example, we can crush domestic steel production in other countries, steel, I mean, if we subsidize our steel industry. If we sell enough steel on the international market or subsidize prices below cost, free enterprise countries can't compete. And what happens? Their steel mills close. No one else can produce steel. Then we can raise the price of steel to whatever level we want. Or we now have a strategic asset that is essential to military dominance, and we own that asset. The same can be true with chip fabrication. Andy Grove in this article made an interesting point about batteries. And his point about batteries was this: most modern battery technologies initially at the time, and this has been about 20 years, but it's still true, were initially developed with Western, in most cases, US technology. The US patents were there. So what happens? US companies say, well, we could manufacture those batteries domestically for a certain price, or we could use Chinese factories, which pay less to their workers, don't have the same environmental laws, don't have the same worker protections, don't have unions. Think how much cheaper we can make the batteries overseas than we can make them here. Andy Grove's point was, yes, in the short term, you're making cheaper batteries, but what happens? The knowledge of how to make batteries is no longer a domestic. That knowledge of how to make batteries, you've now outsourced. And you've outsourced it to another country that's not friendly to you. So they've learned to make batteries. They know the technology that goes into the batteries. Because they're making the batteries every day, they're not stupid. They learn how to make better batteries. And pretty soon, not only the manufacturing, but the technical knowledge of the batteries is there, and they can subsidize the price of those batteries. So you lose your domestic capacity to create an essential resource like a battery. And he walked through all of those examples and more, and basically said, this theory that capitalism and democratic government necessarily prevail is not necessarily true. Autocratic societies subsidizing strategic industries can both undermine your economy and your democracy. And I think that's real. And if you look at how China has monopolized rare earth minerals, if you look at their acquisition of agricultural lands here, and actually even in my country, they actually have owned either own outright or have the key market to rural. You can drive through rural places in the United States of America and see Chinese symbols and think, what? Why are there Chinese symbols in Eastern Washington? I mean, Chinese letters, because that's a farm that's selling products to China.
We have Chinatown every city, so.
Yeah, right. So the key point here, now here's the problem. Our fundamental ideology is different. And our history is different. And China, understandably, believes, the symbol for China in Chinese is a square with a line right through the middle, right? And so they're the center, they're the middle kingdom. And they've been here forever. We can trace 1776, when our country sort of got its start. China's 5,000 years. So their idea about their role in the world is that they should be the center of the world, and they have a much longer game plan. And also, tremendously importantly, how does a country whose government can change every 2 years, because our Congress is elected every 2 years, compete with a country that can have a 20-year time frame because its president and its government don't change in response? So they can make a commitment that our country may not be able to make. Add into that, they've got 1.3 billion people, and they don't have to respect individual rights. It makes it very dangerous. So how do we deal with that? I think there will be continued tension. The big fear is, what do we do if China attacks Taiwan, the major chip manufacturing country in the world right now? China believes they have a divine right, basically, or a historical right to Taiwan. They have the long-standing opposition to the government that they had battled with during their own civil war. And do we really think that the United States or anybody can possibly defend Taiwan when it's that close to China? And China has nuclear weapons, sophisticated aircraft, sophisticated battleships. It would be pretty difficult. So the bigger issue is that's the hot war risk. The bigger issue is what we see here in Argentina and elsewhere. China trying to create economic dependency in foreign countries through infrastructure products, financial loans, etc., trying to create the yuan as an alternative currency, possibly worldwide. While the United States is occupied in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and etc., the Chinese are all around. And my wife and I had the experience of going to the World Economic Forum some years ago. We went several times, and we could see the trade change happen. It used to be that the United States would host a dinner once during the World Economic Forum, and members of the House and Senate would attend, and those tickets would sell out. Those were what we would call a hot ticket. People really wanted to come. The second year we were there were seats available. People were going to see the Chinese presentation. Meanwhile, a country like Japan, which is ironically a pretty strong US ally, ironically given World War II history, was feeling that the outreach towards China was neglecting Japan. One of our problems is, because of the changes in our politics and the politicization of our foreign policy, long-term strategic thinking is very difficult. And because members of Congress, too many of them are interested in getting on television saying something that will please one voting bloc or another or inflame, possibility of reasoned long-term dialogue is difficult. We were myself and a group of, I think, 12 members, former members, were in China the day Donald Trump launched this trade war. It was fascinating. The old school diplomats of China, second-tier diplomacy, these were not current, but they were former ministers, were asking us as former members of Congress, what do you make of this? The hard part was there was some legitimacy to some of what Donald Trump was saying about China, but the manner in which he did it was reckless and dangerous. And how that will happen going forward. I mean, even Biden, he goes to China He tries to negotiate and build some friendship. And then in response to a question, he says, Xi Jinping's a dictator. Well, he may be a dictator, but that's not the best time to say that after you've just tried to negotiate friendships. And so our own arrogance and our sense of entitlement almost is dangerous. And we ignore places like Argentina and others. Now, having said that, we are so fortunate, we, Argentina and the US, to have Mark Stanley as our ambassador. I think Mark Stanley is doing a great job, and his presence here, the way he's conducting himself, shows we are not ignoring Argentina by any means. And I think that's long past due, and I think it's a very positive sign. So final, to close a too long answer. It's not just about US-China relations. I think it's about the free world and China relations. And at some point, we have to convince Xi Jinping and others, look, the world is actually better when people have freedom. It's not easy, and you get criticized. But I take an oath as a member of Congress. I take an oath that says I will die to defend the right of people to criticize me. It doesn't say that exactly, right? But if I say I will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and if the Constitution says you have a right to free speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and I have sworn an oath to defend that, that means if you can call me any name you want. So that's a really different value. We think that's how to live. I do. I don't want to live in a totalitarian state. And somehow, back to close this long answer out, remember Matt McWilliams, who talked about his book on fascism. He said, young people want freedom, but they don't understand that freedom comes democracy and vice versa. So they want to have their freedoms, but they don't believe in democracy. Well, what else gives you freedom? So I don't think it'll come to nuclear war, and I hope it doesn't come to a hot war, because it'd be horrific.
Right, we have to Dario.
Yeah, Dario, please. You probably have better insights.
Well, I don't know about that, but first I just want to thank you and Juan for this course, which has been very enlightening and enriching and just a lot of fun. But I wanted to ask you sort of an overarching question on U.S. foreign policy and obviously what the balance or between, let's say, foreign policy based on principles and values, let's say, and a foreign policy based on strategic interests. And obviously this doesn't apply only to the United States, it applies to practically every country. But I wanted to get your take on that, and particularly the US's, let's say, unofficial or official title as leaders of the free world and defenders of democracy, and at the same time, I've always been fascinated by the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia, for instance, and also the extent to which its actions in the Ukraine conflict have to do with a defense of principles or of furthering or attaining strategic interests. So I just wanted to get your take on U.S. foreign policy, and I know that there are different, I don't know if different camps, but there are different views in Congress and depending on the particular administration. But I was wondering if I could get your views on that, on where the U.S. stands in that respect, and maybe to what extent it has principles-based foreign policy or strategic interest-based foreign policy. Thank you.
It's a great question, Dario. It's both at the same time, and it depends on the administration, and it depends on the Congress, actually, and it depends on the issue. You're exactly right. Saudi Arabia, for us to be selling very advanced fighter planes to Saudi Arabia, their human rights record is not good. And their record on rights of women is terrible. And Saudi Arabia, I think on the same week, if I'm not mistaken, the same week that Argentina was invited to join Saudi Arabia and Iran as part of the BRICS, Saudi Arabia executed a blogger for having made some kind of a joke. Some guy makes a statement online and they cut his head off. Literally cut his head off. That's not a country we should be spending hundreds of billions of dollars with. It is our dependence on oil has corrupted our value system, and our unwillingness to connect our values with our behaviors. And any country is going to make some strategic alliances, and that's not a perfect world. We worked with Stalin during World War II, and Stalin killed 50 million people, I think, in Russia. Stalin was a horrific human, but we needed to meet another horrific human. That was Hitler. And then we had to try to stop Stalin, right? So I think we have to acknowledge that our country's been far from perfect in many, many ways. But at the same time, when we're at most consistent with our core values, we're pretty good. And the hard part is when there are no good choices. And frankly, both the left and the right have made mistakes. And both sides have hypocrisy. I'll give you one example on the left. When the dictatorships, the right-wing dictatorships ran Nicaragua, many people on the left rose up and criticized the dictatorships of Nicaragua. And the United States, I think, contrary to international law, mined the harbors of Managua. We put mines in the water to embargo trade with Nicaragua. This is a violation of international law. And the President Reagan armed the Contras, etc. Well, now who runs Nicaragua? Danny Ortega. He's a dictator. He's a left-wing dictator, but he's a dictator. So where is the left that criticized the dictatorship of the right? Why aren't we criticizing the dictatorship of the left? The same goes true for the right wing. The right wing will forgive some dictators on the right, but condemn dictatorship on the left. Somewhere we've got to say there's a North Star. We would say in the North, we'd say the North Star. I don't know what you say. What do you say? You have the North Star in the South? That's funny. The North Star, as you know, maybe you know, in our astronomy, there in the northern hemisphere, there's a very clear constellation of stars that point to a thing called the North Star. And that constellation, you can always tell where north is. So in our language, we'll say the North Star. It means what is your guiding? What is it that gives you direction? What keeps you oriented? And so the North Star for us, to me, is human rights. And I've talked in this class before about the 3 golden rules, right? Treat other people the way you want to be treated. Don't treat people the way you don't want to be treated. And 3, don't let things happen to other people that you don't want to happen to yourself. To me, that's a pretty good North Star. And we don't always live by it, Dario. And sadly, I think there's I have seen the left turn a blind eye to suffering because we don't like war on the left. The first speech I ever gave, when the Democrats meet, it's called a caucus. So our caucus is meeting. At the time, the war in the Balkans was happening in Yugoslavia. I haven't mentioned this in this class, but at the time, a young Bosnian student who had lost his leg to a Serb mortar was living in my home. We took him in as a part of a human rights effort. His leg had been blown off by a Serb mortar, and we took him in. He's like a son to me. He spent 4 years in our home. So I go to Congress, and Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian dictator, is slaughtering people in the genocide of Srebrenica, where 5,000 plus Muslim men were slaughtered. it was a genocidal war against Muslims. And I had a Muslim Bosnian living in my home. So my caucus, the Democratic caucus, didn't want to see the United States use military force to stop Milosevic. And I stood up, young freshman member of Congress, and said, what do we stand for here? Now, I understand as Democrats, we don't like war, we don't like military-industrial conflicts, etc. But people are getting slaughtered by a genocidal dictator. What do we stand for? If we have to stop that with military weapons, we stop it with weapons. That was the left's failure to see. But then the right will do it on the other side. The right will say, well, let's support dictatorships. So it's not clear. For me personally, the third level of the golden rule means a lot to me. And I don't think we should be backing dictatorships. I think we should use every tool we can to unite against dictatorships on either the left or the right. And it appalls me, frankly, that the Saudi Arabians get away with as much as they get away with in their own country and here. And now, anyway, that's a long answer. I see Victor's probably got a follow-up question, or maybe one does.
Victor, are you going to talk to the same meeting?
Yeah, Victor, go ahead, please.
Gracias, profesor Brian. Ya que están preguntando y usted contesta sobre las relaciones con China, Rusia, y usted que hablar de los sistemas dictatoriales, quisiera preguntarle cuál es su punto de vista respecto a la relación con Estados Unidos y el bloqueo a Cuba.
It's a good question, Victor. I was one of the people who felt that the blockade wasn't working. It's been in place for what, 60 years, more now, I think, something like that. And I don't think it's worked. At the same time, it's a repressive regime in Cuba. You know, when people are willing to try to take an old automobile and turn it into a boat and drive across an ocean to escape, that's a dictatorship. And so the challenge is, of course, we backed the dictatorship before Castro. This is a classic example, right? Victoria, the US was backing a dictatorship before Castro and the revolution. Then Castro became its own dictator. The part of the problem is that at the same time, there were some good things happening in Cuba. Healthcare dramatically improved for the general population. Educational opportunities dramatically improved. There were some very positive things. The challenge, partly politically, is significant in the case of Florida. A significant number of voters in Florida are refugees from Castro's Cuba, and for understandable reasons, they hate Castro and they hate the dictatorship, and they form a very powerful voting bloc in the parliament, in the Florida legislature, and in their congressional delegation. So for them, for very understandable reasons, if anyone were to say, we need to open up trade with Cuba, they would say, then you're condoning and empowering a dictator. And to some extent, they had a good point. On the other hand, did the embargo really hurt anybody? Did it hurt Castro? Did Castro say, oh my gosh, they have an embargo, I'm going to quit? Castro just kept going. And so there's one theory that a different route was better. And this goes back a little bit in a way to one of the questions Juan raised, and one of the points in response to Suraj's question earlier. There are cases in which dictatorships get overturned, either internally or externally, but internally sometimes. If you look at how the Soviet Union fell, yes, Ronald Reagan put pressure on them with our vast military expenditures, but he got incredibly lucky when a man named Mikhail Gorbachev became the leader of Russia and had the wisdom to say, glasnost and perestroika, and we're going to lower the wall. You know, a different leader in Russia, we could have had much different outcomes. So the reason I say that in this context, Victor, is we don't ever, unfortunately, get to test the other side of history, right? We don't get to say what might have happened if we had engaged Castro in a different way. And certainly from the very start, as you know that history well, the Bay of Pigs was a really stupid idea. And it didn't work out well. And so what would have happened if we had lowered the embargo? I don't know. I'm interested, Victor, I'm talking too much. What's your thing? What should we do or should we have done?
Gracias. Pues realmente como país latinoamericano, bajo estas líneas que usted refiere, pues creo que para mi punto de vista también no llevó a buen término ese bloqueo comercial, que al final usted hablaba de esas 3 estrellas, de ese norte que privilegia salvaguardar los derechos humanos. Y creo que para acabar con la dictadura que viven los hermanos cubanos, podría ser renegociar de Estados Unidos cuáles serían las normas, porque yo no conozco Cuba. Mi familia, mucho guatemalteco va a Cuba y hoy cuentan que no tienen ni agua potable. O sea, las condiciones humanas son bastante graves las que están viviendo los cubanos. Y creo que los líderes después de Fidel, pues ya no han impreso la misma dictadura de aquel entonces.
Es un ejemplo de una situación difícil. El problema es que cuando personas están usando una situación muy complicada para parecer sencillo, para ganar votos, eso es el problema. Y eso crea condiciones en que no se puede llegar a soluciones porque algunos benefician de las divisiones. Eso es un parte del problema. Gracias, Víctor. Juan, did you have a question?
Sí, quiero mostrarte esto, Brian, y pedirte una reflexión. Hay que aprender de la historia. En el gobierno de Mauricio Macri, el 3 de abril del 2017, la Cámara de Representantes de los Estados Unidos dictó esta resolución, votó esta resolución. Habla obviamente muy bien del presidente Macri por promover la unidad nacional, reconstruir la economía, combatir la corrupción doméstica, fortalecer la libertad de prensa, defender los derechos humanos fuera del país, atraer inversión directa y muchas otras cosas. Bueno, termina diciendo, lo muestro porque no sé si todo el mundo lo conoce, termina diciendo que adopta la Cámara de Representantes de los Estados Unidos, diplomacia parlamentaria pura, un compromiso de asociación con los Estados Unidos que reafirma que Argentina es un aliado no miembro de la OTAN, cosa que ni en esa época y desde los años 90 nadie recuerda. Pero bueno, eso es algo que puso los Estados Unidos, claro. A mí me parece muy bien, como digo. Le pide al Departamento de Estado coordinar una estrategia de interagencia. Bueno, hay muchas cuestiones muy positivas, muy interesantes, desde una expresión de los Estados Unidos hacia la Argentina. Lo que digo es lo siguiente, ahora está Milei en la Argentina, y Milei tiene una estrategia parecida respecto a la alianza de los Estados Unidos. Después de esa resolución de la Cámara de Representantes, la Argentina, que no tiene que ver con la resolución, tomó un crédito, el más grande en la historia del Fondo Monetario Internacional, y luego vino 2 años complicados para la Argentina, y finalmente terminó muy bien el gobierno, que sí que terminó su mandato, pero no pudo ser reelegido, con una crisis económica. ¿Qué pasó? Que no vinieron inversiones a la Argentina como esperaba el gobierno para tener, de alguna manera, divisas en el país para compensar los déficits, etc. Entonces, el aprendizaje es que la buena relación de los gobiernos no garantiza la inversión extranjera directa, porque los gobiernos no son el mercado, ni tampoco son las empresas. Las empresas miran más allá de los gobiernos. Entonces, simplemente quiero una reflexión, porque a veces nos olvidamos. El gobierno de Mauricio Macri fue muy cercano al gobierno de los Estados Unidos. Extremadamente cercano, tan cercano que, entre otras cosas, sirvió esa cercanía para tomar el crédito más grande en el FMI, donde el mayor miembro, socio, es los Estados Unidos. Entonces, ahora Javier Milei está haciendo lo mismo. Yo creo que es correcto el camino, pero hay que intentar no equivocarse. Entonces, mi pregunta igual quiero que tú reflexiones, quiero decir mi opinión. ¿qué crees que puede cambiar respecto a lo que ocurrió en esa alianza de esos 4 años de Mauricio Macri con los Estados Unidos, con lo que viene ahora, porque esa alianza, en términos económicos, por nuestros propios errores, a la Argentina no le sirvió?
It's a great question and a really interesting history. I would not be surprised at all to see a similar resolution come from the Congress regarding Milei. I think it's because Milei has said positive things about the relationship with the United States. It's because he is admired by conservatives in our country. And I would not be surprised to see a resolution. One thing I hope won't happen, but I think will, is if there is such a resolution, because Milei has been portrayed as a Trump supporter, as a ultra-conservative by some in the Western press, because it's easy, it's lazy, but it's easy. That they say, oh, he once said something nice about Trump, and he spoke to Steve Bannon, who's a terrible human being, but a Trump advisor. Then therefore, Milei is like Trump, and therefore Democrats would oppose the resolution. I think that would be a mistake.
Esto fue Obama, en la época de Obama. Y Milei tiene excelente relación con el gobierno de Joe Biden.
Yes, I
Hay
think
elecciones.
so. The question is going to be, if that resolution is introduced, will Biden and Mark Stanley, I know where Mark Stanley will be, they will lend their voices to the Democrats to say, we need to support Argentina. This is not about a proxy battle that he said something nice about Trump, therefore we don't like Milei. The United States Congress needs to be unified in talking about positive relationships with the nation of Argentina and its people and its economy. So that needs to happen. I'm just saying I could imagine it going, because the press in the States has basically said ultra-conservative, anarcho-capitalist, doesn't believe in climate change, doesn't believe in regulations, he's just like Trump. He's not just like Trump, but that's the easy portrayal. I hope, if there is such a resolution, that both parties, Democrats and Republicans, will support it in the interest of the benefit of both countries. I don't know if it will. If it's not because the members of Congress don't like Argentina, it's because of what they've heard second or third hand about Milei. Milei has something to do with that. My guess is high probability Milei will be invited to address the House of Representatives. It's pretty rare. Not many leaders actually address the House. I would expect that Milei will be invited to address a joint session of Congress. I think it's very likely. And so it'll take a while.
En Argentina,
No,
United
I don't
States.
think so.
United
States. Well, I think it's very probable. I think
¿ya
it's,
está arreglado eso?
no. I'm saying I think it's possible.
Okay.
Because he's gotten enough press and but the problem, there's two problems. One is the Democrats may not like him because they've heard that he likes Trump. But the Republicans may like him only if he is like Trump. Both parties need to calm down and say Milei is the elected official of the nation of Argentina. He has to work with the Argentinian Congress. Our relationship is not a proxy pro or con Trump or Biden. It's we as a country, the United States of America, the country of Argentina, have much in common. We need to work together for common good. No party is perfect in either country. No leader is perfect, but both countries are really good people and really have a lot in common. So let's work together. That's the first thing I hope. The second thing is, it's not enough just to pass a resolution saying we support economic opportunity. We need to probably change some of our domestic content laws regarding rare earth minerals. If Argentina has rare earth minerals needed for battery production, we need to change that and allow some of our, what we call a domestic content rule. Domestic content rule says, in the case of electric vehicles, you will get a reduction in the price of the electric vehicle if the vehicle has a certain percentage, almost all, manufactured in the United States. So if Argentina is producing batteries because of its rare earth minerals, we want to help Argentina, we may need to say, that we can give those tax credits, even if some of the content isn't domestic, if it comes from friendly nations that need the economic growth. The same is true of agriculture. But what's the problem? The problem is going to be what happens if we decide we're going to allow and invite Argentinian exports or imports of beef or soybeans? What's going to happen? Then the beef producers and the soy producers domestically are going to scream. So what you need is, that's where you need, frankly, Bill Clinton was very good at this. Bill Clinton said, look, we need those countries, we need good relationships with them. We have to help their economies. We're going to have free trade agreements. Well, Trump and others, and the Republicans, by the way, used to support free trade. And the Democrats didn't like it. But now if you're going to have economic opportunity for Argentina, you have to be able to sell us something. How else can you pay off your IMF debts? So the question is, are we going to be mature about this? And are we going to back? I think we'll have a resolution of support. I bet that will happen. But then the question is, can we follow that up with actual realistic economic exchanges that benefit both countries? I hope so, because that's what's needed.
Yeah.
Please.
Quiero aprovechar la inteligente pregunta que ha hecho Juan de Dios, porque, como le decía antes, yo estoy muy agradecido a los Estados Unidos porque gracias a una beca Fulbright pude hacer mis estudios en las universidades de Harvard y Tufts y graduarme en la Fecha School of Law and Diplomacy. Pero ¿cuál es la mejor manera de ser amigo de Estados Unidos? Es hablarles con la verdad desde nuestra propia perspectiva. Y eso es lo que voy a intentar hacer ahora. A mí me dio mucha pena ver ayer asumir a un presidente casi en soledad internacional. Vino el rey de España porque creo que el rey de España va a todos los países que han sido colonias de España. Es un trabajo. Pero después no tuvo presente el presidente de Brasil. Estados Unidos, no quiero decir los dictadores como Víctor Orbán, como bueno, gente como Bolsonaro, como, en fin, gente con un background poco democrático. Es decir, y todos partidarios de Trump, porque Bolsonaro es prácticamente una caricatura de Trump, como creo que este presidente trata de ser una fotocopia de Trump. Entonces, a ver, hace 3 semanas, cuando yo estaba nominado, y tenía muchas posibilidades de ganar, participé de una reunión con un muy inteligente amigo de la Wilson, del Wilson Center. A mí se me ocurrió preguntarle qué pensará el presidente Biden de un presidente argentino que dice que el calentamiento global y el medio ambiente es un invento de la ONG y de los comunistas. Por un lado me pregunto, ¿de qué comunistas? Porque acá
todos los científicos son comunistas.
Yo no conozco otro país que sea comunista. Podrán llamarse como quieran. Acá hay capitalismo. Un capitalismo orientado por el mercado y muchos capitalismos orientados por el Estado. Eso es lo que yo veo. Entonces, la pregunta es la siguiente. A mí me dejó bien clara la conversación con que no están nada felices con un presidente que la principal política del presidente Biden, para la cual nombró nada menos que un vicepresidente muy prestigioso como John Kerry, que firmó el Tratado de París sobre medio ambiente, que aparezca un presidente de Argentina que diga que todo eso no existe y que es una trama de las ONG para sacarle plata a la gente o de los comunistas, y la pregunta es, ¿qué comunistas? Entonces, seamos sensatos. Argentina está muy aislada. Yo lo vi ayer. Además, los dos representantes que mandó Estados Unidos, inteligentemente, es al secretario de Energía, porque tienen los ojos puestos en Vaca Muerta. Entonces es entendible. Yo hubiera mandado al secretario de Energía. ¿Y a quién más? A la secretaria de Medio Ambiente. Para que le haga entender a este señor, de alguna manera, que el medio ambiente no es un invento de las ONG. Que Estados Unidos ha firmado con la administración Baird el Tratado de París. Entonces, como reflexión final, y después una pregunta. La reflexión final es, las declaraciones no dicen nada, es decir, son meras palabras, son meras declaraciones. Yo, como le dije antes, hice mi tesis sobre las relaciones Estados Unidos-Argentina desde 1933, cuando Argentina firma el pacto Roca-Runciman y toma partido por Europa, por Inglaterra, hasta 1953, donde el gobierno de Perón hace un reapproachment con los Estados Unidos y entonces su canciller, era Jesús Hipólito Paz, le dice a Perón, usted tiene bolilla roja en el Departamento de Estado, porque el embajador que Perón declaró persona no grata, que se llamaba Spruill Braden, demócrata del ala progresiva, fue como secretario adjunto para asuntos interamericanos. Vale decir, que él le dijo a todo el mundo que Perón era un nazi fascista y que en Argentina, en su neutralidad en la Segunda Guerra Mundial, había sido una especie de pied-à-terre o de base de ingreso en América del Sur del nazifascismo. Y yo dediqué buena parte de mi tesis a romper ese estereotipo, porque no creo que los argentinos tenemos un estereotipo de los Estados Unidos, que hay que acabar con eso. Hay mucho antiamericanismo emocional en los argentinos, no racional. Pero también hay muchos estereotipos de los estadounidenses respecto a la Argentina. Hasta en las películas cómicas, cuando un tipo decide irse a algún lado y es una mala persona, se viene a la Argentina. Acabo de ver en Seinfeld un personaje,
De verdad, de acuerdo.
el de la sopa, el nazi de la sopa, cuando decide cerrar su negocio, ¿dónde va? A la Argentina. Es decir, en la cosmovisión del americano medio, argentino es una cueva de nazis y de fascistas. Y yo intenté explicar lo que era una obviedad. La neutralidad argentina fue pro-británica. Y entonces exhumé todas las cartas. Me fui, porque habían sido liberados en el año 79, cuando yo llegué, todos los documentos del Departamento de Estado que tenían la correspondencia entre Churchill y Cordell Hull. Mientras Cordell Hull, gran secretario de Estado de Franklin Delano Roosevelt, quería que toda América Latina, cumpliendo con la doctrina Monroe, que se cumple 200 años precisamente este año. La doctrina Monroe es de 1823. América para los americanos. ¿En qué sentido? En que ninguna potencia europea de las ex potencias coloniales pusiera los pies aquí.
Sí.
Entonces, ¿qué decía Churchill? Porque le escribía a Cordell Hull, Argentina es el mal vecino. Así titula en el capítulo 7º de su biografía, en la falta de espíritu panamericanista de la Argentina. Y Churchill le decía, eso no tiene nada que ver, para mí Argentina no me sirve como beligerante, me sirve como proveedor de las carnes enfriadas y de los alimentos para las cocinas inglesas. Al final de la guerra, vamos a echar a la pandilla militar que está en Buenos Aires, pero ahora yo necesito que los buques mercantes argentinos vengan con bandera argentina y no sean interceptados en el Atlántico por los submarinos alemanes. Entonces, creo que la gran tarea que tenemos que hacer no es adornarle el oído a ustedes, los americanos, diciéndoles que son el país que hay que tomar como modelo. Yo creo que un buen amigo de los Estados Unidos tiene que decirle en qué se han equivocado ustedes. Además de que nosotros tenemos muchísimos errores y somos responsables de todo lo que nos pasa. Pero yo creo que la buena amistad, la verdadera amistad, no es endulzarle el oído con las cosas que a un americano le gustaría escuchar. Y nada, volviendo a la pregunta original de Juan de Dios, a mí me gustaría una reflexión suya sobre, bueno, qué expectativas tienen, indudablemente en el Partido Demócrata, por lo que dijo Benjamin, mi amigo ellos son muy precavidos. Él habló con mucha diplomacia, no dijo nada muy inteligente, pero le tocamos el tema del medio ambiente y dijo, bueno, repito, ahí sí no estamos de acuerdo. De manera que yo creo que Estados Unidos tiene que tener una política, como diría, no basada en la bulonería de quien se va a declarar un alineado incondicional, porque nadie es incondicional de nadie. Y sí, en los hechos concretos. Nosotros nunca hemos podido ser complementarios económicamente. Exportamos lo mismo. Competimos en el mercado internacional y los precios los pone Chicago. ¿Qué pasaría si Brasil y Argentina, los grandes productores de soja, se unen y el precio lo ponen ellos? Y el americano que piensa en los intereses de Estados Unidos piensa en eso. Yo necesito que Argentina y Brasil no monopolicen. Entonces, es muy difícil. Nuestra relación no ha sido fácil. Y no es fácil, porque no somos complementarios. México, que tiene una retórica muy antinorteamericana, es absolutamente complementario, porque le provee de mano de obra barata a los Estados Unidos y muchas otras cosas. Nosotros estamos lejos en la geografía y enfrentados en la competencia comercial. De manera que, como me considero amigo de los Estados Unidos y desde este día su amigo, le hablo en estos términos porque me parece que esta es la verdadera manera. Así le hablo yo a mis amigos personales. Estoy agradecido a Estados Unidos, lo estoy agradecido a usted por lo que han venido ahora esta noche, esta tarde, pero creo que hay que romper los estereotipos.
¿Romper qué?
Los estereotipos. Argentina no es un país nazifascista ni claro. Dos neutralidades, la de Irigoyen y la de Perón, fueron pro-británicas. Porque si nosotros, toda nuestra producción iba al Reino Unido o a Europa, imagínense qué pudiera pasar.
Yo creo, si puedo.
Sí. Terminé acá.
You've made so many good points, and the history is so important. So thank you for that. And you're absolutely right that the stereotypes don't work. And part of why Juan and I wanted to do this class is to try to build relationships. You can do a class anywhere, right? It's possible I could have applied anywhere on earth for a Fulbright, not everywhere, but what is it, Rachel? 80 places or something where we have Fulbrights. And we chose Argentina purposely, partly because of my tremendous respect, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, for Juan de Dios, one of the smartest, most decent people I've ever met, ever. And also because I believe, and I wrote it in this book, that we neglect our neighbors in the US, and we don't respect our neighbors. If you look at how much US foreign aid goes to Argentina relative to other countries, it's crazy. And it's not just about foreign aid, as you point out, it's about trade, it's about respect, it's about understanding and saying what respectful curiosity, like I said earlier. The challenge is going to be, and you remember, I don't know if you were here, we had a gentleman named Arthur Lupia speak to us, a political scientist, who said that we think that we say things and people hear them, but and so our communication is based on what we say. And he basically said, no, it's based on what they hear, not on what we say. The ultimate outcome of the communication is how you hear it, not necessarily how I say it. Now, I should say it carefully and wisely, but I should never forget that what you hear may not be the same. Why do I say that? Because I think there's an urgent need to improve the understanding and relationship between the two countries. I don't necessarily think Milei is the best choice for that, because he's too easily a Rorschach test. By that, you know, the Rorschach, because we can project onto Milei whatever we want. And so the conservatives in Congress are going to agree with Milei's position on climate change. I think it's utter nonsense and dangerous and destructive. But we still have to work together as countrymen and women. And the problem is, we can't just say, well, I agree with this and I don't agree with that, therefore I agree with Argentina or not. We have to transcend as people and as governments, one leader or another, and say, what's our common shared value and virtue? Freedom, constitutional law, respect for democracy, the rights of the individual, a free enterprise system. I would hope responsibility for the global health of the environment and some other things. Maybe not 100%, but I would hope that. So I hope the criticism and compliments can go both ways. I hope, for example, that Argentinians can say openly to the United States, you need to do this better, or you're doing this wrong. And I hope we can also respectfully say, perhaps Biden can say it, perhaps Ambassador Stanley or some others can talk to Milei and say, you know, hey, Mr. President, we've got some pretty good scientists up here in the United States, and they're not socialists and they're not communists, and they've got the largest base in the world down in Antarctica, and they've tracked the carbon record at Antarctica, and it's going like this. And by the way, Mr. President Milei, the whole world just had the hottest year since human beings kept records. So if we say that an increase in carbon dioxide can increase temperatures, and we've seen an increase in carbon dioxide, and we've seen an increase in temperatures, and I'm not a communist, and I'm not making money, so maybe there's a way for our two countries to learn from one another. But it has to be, we can't just posture and say, Milei's like Trump, or Trump people can't say Milei's like Trump. It has to be Milei is Milei, Argentina is Argentina. There's a complexity to this vote that vastly transcends Javier Milei as a person or Javier Milei as any politics, just as that happens in our own country as well. And so maybe to close, because we're out of time, thank you for your comments, because that's the goal, right? That we have a mature, honest, deep understanding and affection between our two countries. I will tell you that personally, from the bottom of my heart, my wife Rachel is here, our two boys are here. Argentina has a powerful place in our heart. And Argentina, in all its richness, in all the beauty of its people, in its complexity, in its flaws, in its great natural beauty, in its historical history, and its potential future, it does. And I want to thank you all and everyone on this wonderful panel who has spoken for the profound privilege and honor of joining you for the last 4 months. And I want to give Juan de Dios a very small token of my appreciation. In the military, in U.S. military, we have what are called honor coins. And if somebody does extraordinary work, we give them an honor coin. And this is an honor coin from the United States. I also want to share, this is a shameless plug, you can buy this cheap on Amazon. This is the book I wrote in my last 2 years in Congress, where I said, what if I did not care about the political consequences of anything I said? If I just spoke as truly as I could, and what if I did not assume that the situation that we inherit is the best situation? What if we said, what would be a logical way to improve our healthcare system? How should we address foreign relations? What's a better way to deal with energy? How to deal with immigration, etc. And I cared nothing about whether I got reelected. The title, oh, thank you, Juan. The title of the book is Character, Politics, and Responsibility. And the premise is, character means, do you have integrity? Do you listen to others? Are you honest? Are you motivated by service? And the responsibility is, will you take responsibility to do what is right? Will you solve the fiscal deficit so that we don't pass debt on to our kids? Will you solve climate change so we don't pass an overheated climate on to our kids? Will you take responsibility to defend and support people who are in need? So that's the title of the book. It didn't sell, no one was interested, but it mattered to me to write it. And last but not least, unfortunately, much of what is in there has only gotten worse. But we owe it to these younger people and those who are on the screen. We owe it to them to continue the effort. And it's our responsibility. And so we have to do that. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to Universidad Austral for hosting this. Thank you to the Fulbright system, which has offered so many people in both directions. Thanks to Sol Ibarra, our translator, to Pilar and the rest of the team. And Juan de Dios Infinegui. Thank you also to Arturo Vitalo, who has been so much of a scholar and friend. And I've learned a tremendous amount from him. Particular thanks to Fernanda and Nestor, from whom I've also learned a lot. And from many of you here, I look forward to seeing you. You've become friends and we've learned a lot together. And this is, as I said to Juan de Dios, you haven't seen the last of me. Well, we'll be here for several more months, but this is a relationship, it's a friendship de verdad, de siempre. Y vamos a estar en su corazón y ustedes en nuestro corazón. Y vamos a seguir en contacto. Y estoy aquí, y bueno, a hacer cualquier cosa para ayudar. Gracias. At least these books are here, and we're going to post every class. One will circulate it around so that any of you can watch any of the classes again or share them with your friends. And I want to thank my wife, Rachel, for coming here. I hope to see all of you again. I will miss you. Sincerely, I will miss you. ¿Quién trae esa silla? Se sientan unos aquí. Sí. Rachel. Everybody, come on. Y los otros parados. Everyone who's on the screen, so you put him on the screen so we can get a picture of the full class. ¿Están sentando por allá? Sí, uno y otros parados aquí. Perfecto, se sienta acá. Se sienta y otro. Let's do our photo. Vamos a ver una foto. Todos los que parados. Ok, atrás, bueno,
Sí, cogerla. ¿Vas a traer una foto que cuando sí, vale? Uno no.
Tu vida en acomodo. I love this. And everyone in the back is great. Ahí sale con
Los dos primos que te van a sacar.
There's lots of room.
Come on. Vení acá, siéntate acá. No, voy a ir. Bueno, nadie te sienta. Venga a semana. No. Richard. Y todo el resto atrás.
¿Listo? Wiki. Okay.
Víctor, quería decir algo. Mientras tanto, Víctor, di lo que ibas a decir. Mientras sacamos la foto.
Gracias. Primero, un fuerte abrazo fraterno a todos los hermanos argentinos, a ti, Juan de Dios, a Brian, a todos los conferencistas, a la Austral por esta oportunidad tan valiosa que nos da. Un abrazo fraterno a todos, felices fiestas navideñas, un próspero y exitoso año para todos.
Gracias.
Fuerte abrazo.
Muy felices fiestas para todos. Excelente programa.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias.
Un reconocimiento de todos para Sol Ibarra. Ha sido una herramienta vital, majestuosa toda tu participación, Sol. Gracias.
Dale una silla.
Bravo,
Okay. When is someone getting pictures? Okay. Again, Suraj, good to see you. Everyone, all of you, I see all of your faces. Thank you so much.
Foto, film, okay? Thank you very much to everybody. Hay mucho que tal.
Bueno,